so today's video is going to be my favorite summer palettes for the year of 2023 slash palettes that I really just want to use more in the summertime, because I do these videos seasonally now where I tell you guys the palettes that I really want to concentrate on and use more during each season. I feel like that this is the best way for me to rotate my collection. It's just easier for me. So I can find like a nice balance on using palettes that I would like to either use more or palettes I haven't used in a while that I would like to dip back into. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I only have 10 palettes here, and they're mostly like recent additions to my collection, but I still want to talk about them because they're some of my favorite summer palettes, or they're just palettes that I really just want to jump into more. So the first palette is the one that I probably have been using the most in this spring and summer season, because I got this back in the end of May, I believe, but I love this palette, and this is the Simply Posh Cosmetics Citrus Punch palette. I would like to use this more though in this month of July, because I think that this is such a beautiful summer color story. I'm raving about this palette in my rankings video that will be up before this video goes up, and also I think I talked about it in my May favorites as well, and I did a couple of looks for my first impressions on this palette. I just can't get enough of it. I think that this is such a perfect summer palette. It has all like the summer colors that I love to wear. Y'all know I love pinks and greens. Those are like some of my favorite colors, but more so in the summertime, I really love wearing yellows and oranges and these like warmer tone kind of pinks and these green shades. I mean, like, what more could you ask for? I think I'm going to use this palette again on actually Monday, because I'm supposed to go to a barbecue for 4th of July, so I really just wanted to use this palette. I'm going to do a red look tomorrow when I go to work, so I just felt like using this because, like, it's just a light, easy palette that I don't have to worry about it being, like, too, like, bold. And also, like, that's what I'm saying, like, that's why this is such a good summer palette, because it's not that bold in your face kind of saturated pigmentation. So it's not like too colorful, but it's like just enough where I just love the mattes and the way they blend in here, and the shimmers are absolutely stunning. So I'm really excited to use this palette even more this month, because this is probably going to be my most used palette in the month of July, or one of my most used, because I really just want to dip back into it some more in the next couple of weeks. So that is the first palette. Okay, the second palette is the most recent palette to my collection. I just recently finished trying out all the shimmers in this palette yesterday, so I would like to dip back into it some more this month, and that is the Nomad Cosmetics Okavango Safari palette. This is their latest addition to their eyeshadow palettes, and this is the latest palette they have come out with. I'm not going to be swatching anything because I just feel like we'll be here a long time, and I just feel like sharing the palettes with you. But if you guys want to see swatches or any looks on any of these palettes, I have a first impressions on literally every single palette. I always do a first impressions on all the palettes that I try. So if you just search my channel, it will come up and you guys can see looks. And also I do talk about this in my rankings video, and I swatch some of the shades. So I do want to get back into this palette a little bit more in the month of July and throughout the summertime, because I think this is a really pretty like neutral palette with pops of green. I really want to do the green look that I did with this palette again because it was so pretty. This is not my absolute favorite Nomad palette, but I feel like I will get some more use out of it because of the neutral shades in here, and I can just use it for a quick neutral look if I need to, or if I just want a neutral look in general for that day. I think it'll be an easy palette to reach for and create looks with because it's half neutral, half green. And again, I just think that these colors are very unique for summertime, and I don't know why this color story is so trendy for this summer, but a lot of brands are coming out with green, neutral-ish kind of palette color stories. And I love seeing it because I really do love the color combo, and I think they're very flattering colors on most skin tones. So yeah, I'm very excited to dip back into this again. I'm just like not obsessed with the formula of this one, but it's good. It performs well. I wouldn't say don't go and pick it up. I still think it's good palette to add to your collection, especially if like this is a kind of color story you're looking for, or you just want to try Nomad for the first time, or you are a Nomad collector. I don't think you'll dislike this palette, but it's just not their best formula wise, but it's still a good palette. So that one is the Nomad palette I'm going to be adding for this summer, because I have like five other Nomad palettes, but those were more so like winter, spring kind of vibes. I'm still going to try, I'm using the Royal Europe palette tomorrow for my red look, so I'm already going to be using that again. But I do want to get more use out of this palette specifically in the month of July. Okay, now let's just talk about a couple of Colourpop palettes. I only have 3 to talk about. I don't want to bore you guys for too long, but these are just the 3 that I want to use a bit more. But actually, there's only one that I really want to concentrate on, because the other 2 I actually was able to use this past spring, and I've used them a couple of times. But I just want to mention them because they are like 2 of my other favorite summer palettes. But the one that I really want to use and get back into is the Colourpop In The Limelight palette. And I believe I mentioned this one last year as well in my summer palettes video. I believe it came out last year in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. And I also believe that this palette is unavailable because they discontinued it rather quickly. I think it was only available for a few months, and then they completely discontinued it, and they have not brought it back. But this palette really did surprise me on how much I actually ended up liking this palette a lot more than I thought I would. I thought that these greens were going to be too light. I thought that they weren't going to be pigmented enough, but once you put this on your eyes, it really is a stunning palette. I love the shade Booked, and these shimmers are just so freaking stunning. I will swatch some of these because they are just so pretty. So that one is the shade Booked, and then this one is the shade Playdate. They're just really beautiful metallics, and I think that they're playful greens that, again, you don't feel like it's too colorful, and you can kind of, you know, like kind of set your own vibe, and you don't have to feel like it's like too bold on your eyes. Because sometimes, like when I'm hanging out with friends or I'm doing something with friends, it's like I don't want my eyeshadow to be like too much, because everybody's like, oh my god, like why is your eyeshadow, like it's so annoying sometimes. But also, like, usually I don't give a fuck and I just wear whatever fuck I want to. So but it's still a really pretty green palette, and I do like that there's a bit more contrast in this palette as compared to some of their other monochromatic palettes, because sometimes, like, if they don't put like a deep enough shade in the palette, it doesn't add enough depth or contrast to the look, and a lot of the looks can look similar or repetitive. But I feel like that this offers enough variety, like with this deepening shade and this like pinky mauve. And even my favorite shade is actually Star Power. This is such an unexpected, like literally limelight kind of shade where it reflects green, but it looks white in the pan. But when you put it on your eyes or your inner corners, it's like a dual chrome greenish white. It's so beautiful. So yeah, I really do want to whip this palette out again this month, because I haven't used it in like, I think I used this back in like the winter time possibly, because I wanted to just whip it out. So I think I only used it like once this year, but I really do want to whip it out some more. I also really want to use it with the Colourpop Tinkerbell palette, possibly, because I decided to keep that palette, so I want to see if I'm going to be able to use it at some point, because I still haven't had a chance to use it. I haven't used that palette like in maybe like a year, because I wasn't sure if I was going to declutter it or not. But also, I would just feel bad about decluttering any of my Colourpop Disney palettes in general. So I decided to keep it and just keep it on display. But I want to use it with the In The Limelight palette, because I think they would be really pretty palettes to combine together, because I also really like doing that. For the past year, I don't normally do that as much, or I'll just use like a single shadow to deepen up a look if the palette is very mid-toned. But I just want to grab the other palette that I wanted to talk about before I forget, sorry. But usually what I'll end up doing if I want to like deepen up a little bit more of a look then I'll just take like a shade that I feel like is going to go really beautifully, or like a palette that could be a good companion palette to the palette that I'm using, and I'll just use that and deepen it up with another palette from the same brand. I've just been enjoying doing that a lot. Okay, the next palette is the Colourpop In The Springs palette. This was my most used summer palette last year, and I think one of my most used palettes in my most used palettes of 2022. So I just was obsessed with this palette for last summer. I used it a ton. It was definitely my #1 most used summer palette last year. And I actually took this to California with me, so I was able to use this at least once there. I used like this bronzy shade, and I used some of these more like corally neutral shades, and it turned out to be a really pretty look. I think I used the orange shade as well. And then I popped on, I believe, Hot Tub on the inner corners, and everybody loved my makeup look. First, California, I just really wanted to keep my eyeshadow more warm tones or very neutral warm tones. Like, I didn't really do too many colorful looks at all. I did like warm neutral eyeshadow looks, and everybody was actually really nice about my eyeshadow look. So it's nice when you get compliments sometimes. Like, I'm not like trying to get a compliment every time I do my eyeshadow. It's just like very validating, because it's like, oh my god, someone actually thinks my makeup looks good. So but anyway, I do want to use this palette maybe once or twice in the summertime this year, but I'm not going to make it an absolutely priority for I'm not going to make it an absolute priority for me to use this, because since I already have used it a couple of times, I'm not too worried about whether or not I'm going to use this again. But if I want to do like a blue look, I do want to use like these shades again at some point, or like just a quick neutral look, I can use this too. But this is still one of my favorite Colourpop palettes, and still one of my favorite summer palettes. But I am glad that I was able to use it a couple of times already. But I'm just mentioning it again because it's still one of my favorites for summer. So, okay, next up is another Colourpop palette. I think I've mentioned this, I think 2 years in a row as being one of my favorite summer palettes from Colourpop, and this is the Malibu Barbie palette. And again, I've said this like a million times, but I cannot believe I was going to skip over this palette because it became like one of my favorite palettes that they've ever done. This is just such a perfect spring summer palette, and hopefully I will be able to go see the new Barbie movie, because when I do, this is what I'm wearing on my eyeballs, obviously. So I'm definitely planning to use this when I go see the movie, and I'm probably going to do a pink look with it because I haven't done a pink look with it in so long. I actually was able to dip into this palette, I think in like April or May, so I was able to use it, but I think I only used it once this year. But I do want to whip it out maybe, you know, maybe once or twice, so I would be able to get a little bit more use out of it. And again, since it is one of my favorite summer palettes from Colourpop that they've ever done, I just love the blues and the pinks and the yellows and the oranges. So you can do like a neutral look with these, or you can even go more neutral with these shades. And the shimmer shades are just absolutely stunning in this palette. And then you have the pop of blue and pink, and they're very pigmented. And then this orange shade and this turquoise is amazing on the lids. I love like Colourpop's really, really light shimmer shades because they're always so wet looking and so sparkly and beautiful. I'll swatch some of these too. I mean, I don't think this video is going to be that long, so we can swatch some of them. So that one is Cali Girl, and this one is Surf's Up. They're just so gorgeous. So I really do want to do a blue look with it as well, but I don't know if I'm going to necessarily have time to do that. But it's just such a beautiful mix of colors, and as compared to the next palette that I'm going to talk about, this is the way that you do a color story that makes sense, but it's still like pops of color that go with everything else in the palette. Like, this is one of my all-time favorite collab color stories that they've ever done because it just makes sense. And I'm not saying every single palette needs to make sense, but I'm saying like this is such a cohesive, well thought out color story that's why I love this palette so much. And also just the pops of color work because there's other tones that you can use that will either tone it down a little bit or it'll still keep it like summery and vibrant, but like create like a really beautiful look. So that one is the Barbie palette. And then the last Colourpop palette I want to mention, because I do want to use this maybe like once or twice more this summer possibly. I'm not sure if I'm going to make this a priority though, but I kind of want to use it a little bit more. And that is the Colourpop Alice in Wonderland palette. This is the Lost in Wonderland palette. I wasn't going to add the limoncello because I think I put that in my spring palettes video, and I already ended up using that twice in the spring. I used it once in California, and then I used it like a month or two before that, so I was able to use that palette a little bit in the springtime. So, and the same thing with the Lilac You a Lot, I was able to use that palette at least once, and that's more so a spring palette for me. But this palette I really do want to try and use again, maybe once or twice. I kind of want to try and use this shade again, Lose Something. And I kind of want to use the shade Stark Raving Mad. The shimmers in here are really, really pretty. Maybe I'll end up pairing this with another palette because I'm not absolutely obsessed with the mattes in here, but because the mattes are a little bit too pastel. They're a little bit light and a little bit hard to create a look with because the only deepening shade in here is a black sparkly matte shade. So, but every time I was doing my looks with this palette, I actually ended up really liking how my eyeshadow would turn out when I used this palette. So it kind of surprised me on that I actually liked this palette a lot more than I thought I would. But I just wish that they would have put some like more contrasting mattes in here, or a little bit more of like deepening mattes in here, so we could create some more depth and dimension. But I also understand it is a Disney palette. It is a Disney color story. And I think with Disney, they are the ones that pick the colors and the color story. It's Colourpop that just provides the formula and the pack and the shades. So, but I don't know what Disney was thinking creating this. It kind of feels Colourpop-y to me, because everybody was saying that they think that this feels like a little bit rushed from Colourpop, but Colourpop doesn't really have that much control over the Disney collabs. But usually with the Disney palettes, they put a lot more thought and design into the color story. But I thought with the Snow White palette, I kind of had the same issue where it was like too light for most skin tones to use, and I kind of feel the same thing about this palette. But at least the Snow White was a very cohesive color story. This was just like kind of random, and everybody was like, why is there only a black as the deepening shade? Like they could have put like a pretty like magenta pinkish shade in here, or they could have put like a deeper blue or a deeper green, but I digress because it's not like it's gonna change. But the shimmers are unexpectedly very beautiful in here. I mean, they really have stepped up their shimmer formula anyway, and I absolutely love the small packaging. It's so easy to store. I really, really do love the packaging of this. I love the design, everything. It's just the color story that doesn't make me reach for this palette as often as I would like to, because it's just like something that I can like skip over because I'm not really going to use it that much. Okay. Next palette is one that I've literally put, I think, in every single favorite summer palettes video, and that is the Give Me Glow Extra Spicy palette. This palette is huge, by the way. Like, this is probably the biggest palette that I'm going to be talking about, because Give Me Glow always gives you like giant pans for their eyeshadows, but at least like they give you your money's worth. I just wanted to say before I talk about this palette that the Give Me Glow Vintage Rose palette, I usually put in every single spring palettes video, but that was the only palette that I ended up not using in my spring palettes, because I wanted to update you guys. Like, out of all the spring palettes that I mentioned in that video, the only palette I ended up not using was the Give Me Glow Vintage Rose palette. So maybe I'll be able to use that at some point in July. Maybe I'll just have myself use that. But every time I want to grab pinks and greens now, I'm always reaching for the Cosmic Brushes Muse palette, But I'm not sleeping on Give Me Glow because their formula is still literally top-notch, fantastic quality. And they're still one of my favorites. But I ended up using this palette quite a bit last summer. So I'm hoping to use this at least once, because I have used this a ton and it has been one of my most used summer palettes. And I'm telling you, oh crap. I just swatched with the finger that I'm gonna have to unlock my screen with because it just went on the oh my god, I just like got eyeshadow all over that because it just went on the screensaver and I just swatched that shadow, but like then I can't see myself if the screensaver is on. So that is Ghost Pepper. Like, look at that, isn't that stunning? Like, insane how opaque these are. And the red, look at that red shade. Like, you can't tell me that those aren't super opaque. Like, Give Me Glow does not play with their quality. Like, it's absolutely phenomenal. But I have not picked up anything from Give Me Glow eyeshadow palette wise since this palette came out, and I have zero regrets getting this one. I'm so happy I decided to get this one. And it's such a beautiful palette. Even though it's only 9 shades, you can do so many different looks with this palette because the reds are so deep and dark. I love doing like the oranges together with the red on the outer corners, or doing like these 2 shades with like the bronzy color, or doing the reds with the orange, or doing the gold with the yellow and some of these peachy shades. Like, there's so many different options that you can do with this, but also like they're so pigmented and so blendable and easy to use, and the shimmers are just insane. So I'm hoping that I can use this palette at least once. But if I use it, it's probably going to be for my friend's barbecue because, well, for a future barbecue, because we're supposed to have one the 14th of this month as well. So we will see what I end up using. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just a little tired. Okay, so the next palette is one from Onanzai, and I actually did put this in my spring video, but I did say I was potentially going to try and use this more so even in the summertime, so I'm going to mention it again. I don't normally do that. I don't always mention the same palette in one season as opposed, and also mention it in a second season, because usually I will pick color stories that will go for that season for me. Like, you can use whatever eyeshadow you want whatever time of year. If you want to wear those eyeshadows, you rock them. Like, don't tell me to tell you different. But I mean, don't let me tell you different. You can wear whatever the fuck you want. But this palette, I just felt like I did not use enough in the spring, and I haven't really gotten enough use out of it. I'm not adding the Flora Story palette. That palette is just so difficult to use. But I did want to mention the Onanzai Planet Spirit palette by Batty Bean again, because I just think this is such a stunning summer color story. So I do kind of want to try and use this at least once, possibly twice in the summertime this year. And I just think that these mattes are such beautiful, punchy, pigmented mattes, and the shimmers are absolutely stunning in here. So I kind of want to do like an orangey green look again, or do like an orangey look. But I did do an orangey look the last time I actually used this palette. So this color story is a little bit challenging to me, and usually I have to pull in like maybe 1 or 2 other shades from other palettes. But I'm going to try and use this at least once this summer. But they are beautiful shades. The shimmers are stunning, and the mattes are just so punchy and pigmented and in your face on the eyes, but they blend out beautifully. Have absolutely no issues with the quality of this one. And the artwork is absolutely beautiful, but it's just because since it's 10 shades, I did show you guys other palettes that I didn't feel as limited by, with palettes that are only 9 pan, like the Give Me Glow one that I just showed you, and the Limelight palette from Colourpop. So we'll see what I can create with this palette, because I still really love it. So I really want to try and use that when I can. Okay. We're going to just talk about the palette that I'm wearing on my eyes today, and then we have 2 more palettes from Natasha Denona, and then that's it. So the next palette I wanted to mention is I'm holding it upside down, the Ace Beauté Aura palette. This is the palette that I'm wearing on my eyes today. I just really wanted to do the purple look again that I did with this palette, because the purple shimmer is actually my favorite shade in this palette. It's so stunning and beautiful. So I really have been enjoying this palette, and I actually have used it twice since I got back from California. That's including today, though. I did use it the day after I got back from California, and I did like the gold look with it again. This gold shimmer is so stunning, but even though this is not the typical palette that I would actually think of to use for the summertime, because these are kind of more like fallish kind of vibes, I still think that they're going to be really pretty for this time of year, because like I said, like grungy greens are back, so I feel like these kind of tones I could probably get away with. But also, again, you can wear whatever the heck you want to. But these mattes are just so easy to use, and the shimmers are beautifully pigmented, and so are the mattes. So, and the shimmers are just super sparkly, and I really want to try and do maybe a couple more looks with this palette again. We will try and dip into it when we can. So today I'm using the shade Soul in the crease. Then I darkened up the crease more with Wistful, and then I used Sultry on the outer corners. And then for the lid, I went in with Halo, which is my favorite shade in the palette. And then I just went in with Moonlight on the inner corners, and that is just such a stunning, super sparkly shade on the inner corners. Like, it's just a beautiful palette. So I'm not going to swatch anything because I'm showing you guys my eye look. The red is super rich and beautiful. It's just, all these shades are just so lovely, and I really just want to try and use this palette again when I can. So that is the Ace Beauté Aura palette, and then we just have two more palettes to talk about. Oh my god, I'm getting like hungry again. I'm supposed to see my boyfriend today, but I haven't had lunch yet. I just had a snack because usually we eat dinner together, so I don't want to like fill up on food before I see him. So yeah, hold on one second. Okay, so we just have two more palettes to talk about. So they're both from Natasha Denona. So the first one is the latest addition to Natasha Denona's eyeshadow palettes, and y'all know I had to talk about the Natasha Denona Yucca palette. I absolutely fell in love with this palette. It ranked really, really high in my rankings video for the palettes that I tried in the year of 2023. And I really just do want to get some more use out of this. I did get to use all of the shimmers in here, but I haven't used it since then for like a few days. So I really would like to dip back into this palette again, because I think the shimmers are absolutely stunning, super sparkly, super beautiful on the lid, and the mattes just blend so easily. The mattes are super buttery smooth and velvety, and I just love everything about this palette. The only thing is that I wish that maybe they would have put like maybe another shimmer that was like a little bit more green leaning, but they do have this shade Macchia. This shade is a little bit out of place in this palette because it's like a silvery color, but I did find a way to use it, and the look that I did with it still ended up being beautiful. This kind of reminds me of the way that you use the Glaminatrix Nearly Natural palette, is that the mattes are just companions to how beautiful the shimmers are, is that the shimmers really are the star of the show in this palette. And also we have like 3 different variations of gold in here, and y'all know I love gold shimmer. That's like my favorite. But I'm telling you, the shimmer quality in here is probably her best that she's done in the midi palettes. I can't quite speak on the bigger palettes because I only own the gold palette, so I'm not sure like how improved the quality has been for those palettes as compared to the midi palettes, but I can let you know about the midi palettes because this is my 4th midi palette that I own, because I'm not necessarily going to be spending $129 on an eyeshadow palette. I feel like Natasha Denona is my limit when it comes to spending more than $50 on an eyeshadow palette. It's going to be a Natasha Denona midi palette for me, because I feel like you get the best bang for your buck with these palettes, and also you get the quality, and you also get the you get 15 shades. So I think that it's a great value for the quality that you're getting and the pigmentation and everything. So I love this palette. I'm obsessed with it. It's super stunning. So this one is Kamarabi, and this one is Plantasia. They're just such stunning, super sparkly, wet looking shimmers, and they really don't even transfer that much. And I think that's why I love this palette so much, is because they're kind of more of like a creamier texture. They're not like, but they're still super wet and metallic, but they have a little bit more of a binder to them, so they don't really transfer as much as like super sparkly metallics usually do. And I really love the greens in here. I love like the different contrasts of like the orangey shades and the mustardy shades and the green shades and the cooler tone khaki kind of brown shades and this beautiful green. That's the only shade that I still haven't used yet, but the quality of this palette is just phenomenal. So I really just want to use it a bit more this month, which I definitely will, because like it's probably going to be my most reach for a palette besides the Simply Posh palette, because I just really want to use it more. Okay, and then the last palette, I don't know if I mentioned this in my spring video, but I want to kind of use this maybe once in the summertime. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to use it more than once, and that is the Natasha Denona Sunrise palette. This has always been one of my favorite like spring summer palettes. This one I have loved since I got it. I believe this came out in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. So there is no smell coming from it. You know what's weird is that the Yucca palette kind of has a little bit of like a warehousey kind of smell, like an earthy kind of smell, but I think it'll be fine. Like it's not like it smells bad, but this one doesn't smell like anything. So I don't know if it was just made in a different warehouse or what, but I did get it from Ulta. So anyway, I just really want to try and use this palette at least once, because I really love these colors for this time of year. I love the yellows, I love the oranges, I love like the berry tones and the warm tone neutral shades. They're all just such stunning colors. Most people like aren't in love with the quality of this one, but I just love the color story of this one, and I think the quality is still really, really good. Like, I don't have any issues with any of these shades. They all perform so beautifully. My only thing is that I wish that there was more of a deepening option besides this color, which is called Clove. It's kind of like a purpley brown, but there's really nothing else to deepen up in this palette. But you can always take like these shades, because these shades are pretty deep as well. Like this shade Jasper is a good deepening shade, and the shade Glory. So I'll use like the yellows with the, I really want to do that look again with the yellow and this color. That would be so pretty, and put like the berry tone all over the lid. That'd be gorgeous. So yeah, I do want to try and use this palette, but my favorite shimmers in this palette are the ones in this row, because I find that these are so wet and metallic looking, and they're just so super shiny and beautiful on the eyes. I don't know, there's just something about these ones that I really, really love. But again, y'all know I love goldy tone kind of shimmers. So yeah, that is the last palette that I have to talk about. I was kind of looking at like my bookshelf and in my palette drawer, and honestly, I don't think there's anything else I really want to use. So